Thank you for joining us for today's Ipsos Foresight webinar featuring new data and interviews with industry experts about the future of play, from player equity to cost to fairness. So now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Matt Carmichael, editor of What the Future. Matt, you have the floor.
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Future Play. It's our companion issue, if you will, to our final issue of last year about the future of work. So today I'm going to do what I do in a lot of What the Futures. I'm going to walk you through a lot of great exclusive data we've put together for this issue. I'm going to take you through some of the interviews we conducted with amazing people who have such great insights about the future of play. You'll hear from some of them directly as we bring that audio in to kind of give it a little more of a podcasty feel. And I'm going to walk you through some really exciting new features we have that we're using now to think about the future and think about how all of these different forces are playing into, pardon the pun, the future of play. As always, What the Future is our monthly magazine about the future of a certain topic. And we're really looking forward to introducing the future of play to you. I'm going to run you through a little bit of how this issue came to be, and then I'm going to go off camera and just take you right through it. So let's dive in. If you've been to One of the Futures before, you probably know that I'm a dad. And as a dad, I and my kids do a lot of playing. Sometimes that's sporty things, which we'll talk about. Sometimes it's video games. Often it's outdoors, but sometimes it's indoors. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes not so much. But the genesis of the issue is a conversation I had several years ago about a toy company, and they were thinking about the future of climate change and how changes in the climate and changes in weather would make it perhaps more inhospitable to be outside and to play outside. And that might change the balance of where we play inside versus outside. And I was kind of fascinated at the time to think about all of the different ways that climate change is going to impact daily lives. And it's going to have such an impact across such a variety of sectors, as does the future of play itself. It's not just about play, it's so much broader than that. And so thinking about these issues about climate change and these issues about weather and these issues about changing behaviors and buying behaviors and habits and routines, it was really also interesting to hear that brands were thinking about all of that as well. And so that's kind of where this issue started. And now here we are. It's not just me and all of these brands that are thinking about these things. One of the world's leading racing cyclists, Guillaume Martin, fears that his sport and the future of the Tour de France are changing because of climate change. His concern has grown as scorching temperatures have literally melted the pavement. He told reporters, "I wondered what I was doing there, making extreme efforts in extreme temperatures. Lately, we realized that in our disordered world, it will be more and more difficult to play sports," he said. Surfers are similarly concerned and are becoming outspoken activists. And they're feeling these impacts from their position at the top of their sport and the top of their world. But what about all the other pro athletes and amateur athletes and even just parents with kids out on the soccer field? Now, climate change is just one factor that will influence how we play in the future and who gets to play and where. Play is a serious business and it's impacting so many different sectors, from food to beverages to sports to streaming, toys, retail, and more. And as usual, the trends wrap around each other and have circular influence. So as we're thinking about the future of play, we use our usual hex map as a tool to kind of think about the macro forces and the trends that are impacting the future of our topic. So we're thinking about technology, of course, always, right? We're thinking about the metaverse and how that is going to change things. Thinking about the platforms that people use to play, and thinking about the retailers that sell those technologies and interface with the customers. We're thinking about fandom and how people express being a fan of all the things of play, things like apparel or fantasy sports, and also the way that being a content creator is changing the way we play and changing the way we are an audience. We're thinking about sports, which are a huge sector of play. Both kids and adults, pros and amateurs, and we're thinking about how climate is going to disrupt that pipeline, or is it? We'll talk about that as we go. We're also thinking about non-digital games. It's easy to just think about play as a thing we do moderated by screens and mediated by screens, and certainly it is, and we'll talk about that. But we wanted to talk about something we saw certainly resurging during the pandemic about tabletop games, board games, card games, etc. We're going to talk about climate change, as we've already started to, and we're going to talk about performance science, about the ethics, about the applications, about how we can change ourselves as humans, as well as changing, as well as how that change the future of sports. When we're doing What the Future, we use the Ipsos theories of change. We are always thinking about these things in the background. We're thinking about the macro forces that act across the world, those kind of huge, big tectonic plates that underlie everything. Sometimes they move slowly, sometimes they get accelerated, sometimes there's a shock to the system, but they're always there driving change. On the right, we're thinking about the signals, the things we see in the news, the headlines, new inventions, new regulations, all those kind of things that we see today that give us some sense of something changing for tomorrow. And we don't always know what that's going to mean, but as futurists, we're thinking about those things and our little spidey sense kind of starts to tingle. And in the middle, at the center of things, always is the humans. How these macro forces and these signal manifestations are going to change things for us as people, as markets, and as societies. And these are just two of the kind of bedrock foresight tools that we use as we're preparing an issue of What the Future. One of the tools that we use as well is something that was developed in our Strategy 3 practice by my colleague Trevor Sudana, and it's about future jobs to be done. So in a traditional jobs to be done framework, we think about how we don't buy a product just to own the product. We're really just hiring that thing to do a job. So we don't buy an energy drink because we want to own an energy drink. We hire it because we need focus or rehydration or an energy boost. And so when we think about the future of play, we've developed several future jobs to be done. One is around helping to enhance my game. So it's about helping me increase my stats, increase my tolerance for heat extremes. And in this world, we kind of imagine it as some wanting things very natural and some want it enhanced. And there's this tension currently at play with a lot of fitness solutions. Do I want organic or do I want the latest probiotic for endurance? Either way, we seek the best of performance. And so we imagine a world where performance enhancing solutions go beyond the field to the boardroom or the classroom. And maybe they'll be temporary, maybe they'll be for a special occasion, or maybe they're the kind of things that we'll be using day in and day out. Future job 2 is about helping me transition from offline to online and back. And we think about helping to pick up right where I left off, no matter the location or device or account, and helping me join at any point in my game in real life or digitally. That essentially these spaces are going to start to blend a little more. And if one thing is certain, it's that hybrid is here to stay, and the switching is where this tension lies. Making sure everything is everywhere all at once can get complicated fast, but maybe it doesn't have to. So imagine a world where some sort of non-traditional or flexible schedule reaps the benefits of dynamic pricing by securing goods when they're least expensive. Number 3 is helping me make my to-do list fun. So help me learn sports, help me make fundamental more fun for kids so they can master them, help me motivate myself to do marathon spring cleaning. What if we're not gamifying everything though? What if behavioral economists tells us that gamifying bad behaviors like gambling everyone is very effective? But what about gamifying good behaviors or just the mundane? And so here we imagine a world where you enter a goal into a program or an AI, and it instantly creates an experimental game to motivate you to reach that goal. These are all really interesting ideas that we can start to see the innovative potential of. As we talk through the future of play, there are a few things to keep in mind. One is that our playtime is largely, but not entirely, as we'll discuss, mediated by screens. And two is that there are a number of tensions that we'll talk about, and we don't think things are going to improve on too many of them, or at least we're more negative than possible. But that said, let's start with some hope. Future options and gaps. This is one of the new features we're debuting, and it's about the futures we can all agree on. We largely agree, when asked, on a common vision for the future of play. We want a world where we spend time playing in the physical world, where climate change doesn't impede that, where our kids have equal access to compete in sports. We want to spend more time playing, and we want to do that ourselves actively rather than watch others play. But there's a gap between this future we want and the future we expect. So what roles are there for brands to help close that gap and get us to the futures we agree on? We've run these type of questions on a number of topics, and this gap is something we see again and again between the future we want and the future we expect we're going to get. So how do we get to the future? How do we get to the future we want? Stay tuned. You'll note that we've brought back global data. The future, and I know you might have a hard time believing this, is not entirely contained in the United States. Things that happen outside will impact us, and things that Americans do will impact others on this planet. So I'm excited to debut some data from the Ipsos Global Trends 2023, our most ambitious trend study ever, which looks at a host of topics, including how we spend our leisure time around the world across 50 markets, repping 70% of the Earth's population and 90% of its GDP. No biggie. Globally, 28% of people say that they played video games in the past week. That's fewer than those who use social networks, watch TV, or listen to music, but more than those who played sports or went to a concert or museum. People in the North America and Asian Pacific regions are more likely to be video games players. But given the small generational fall off, more digitally native generations, which is about 34% of Gen Z versus 26% of Gen X, compared to just 19% of baby boomers, gaming is poised to be a growing way the population will spend its time. Back in the US, the audience for gaming is broadening across all types of demographics. As fun and games continue to play an important part in our lives, there's a tension between online gaming and screen-free play, says Best Buy's Joe Giefer. We want to limit screen time, but we also use screens to develop and socialize and play, just like we do with in-person and tabletop games. Can both forms of play continue to thrive in the future? Giefer says that what it means to be a gamer is shifting, and because play means different things to different people, gamers aren't a monolith as a segment. A retailer like Best Buy can help foster that community and help people discover new ways to play. She says the stores themselves are sometimes called a, quote, adult playground. For younger players, she sees an interesting trend at play in her own home. She says, kids learn how to play and get better at games by streaming and watching others play. When I was a kid, you just had to keep playing or talk to someone about it. Watching someone is probably a far more efficient way of getting better. I know my kids watch streaming and watch YouTube videos of people playing Roblox and Minecraft and Among Us kind of nonstop if I'd let them. I try not to let them. But it's just one more way play and gaming are evolving as social experiences, even if we are physically by ourselves. But when I want to come back to this adult playground thing and this continued importance of buy before you try. I say this as someone in the market for a gaming PC for his own kid. Don't tell, their birthday's coming. I just visited Best Buy and a couple other retailers, and wow, the gamer community is a strong presence there. If you haven't checked out this space, I highly suggest walking into a retailer and seeing what the folks are up to. Here's how Jill sees the stores playing into the landscape.
The other thing about the physical retail stores in particular is even as the concept of play, we hear from customers in research that Best Buy stores are like this adult playground where they come to for try before you buy and get a chance to touch and feel products, try them out, include some video games. And can talk to those associates. We're also seeing experiential retail in general is a form of play or entertainment at the very least. Different retailers are trying different things in the experiences they can bring to people in their physical stores through pop-ups, through modular rotating types of attractions. And it serves as an entertaining way for customers. That's maybe the new malls where teens will come back and check out, hey, what's new in this store? And it's just something that we continue to see retailers will be experimenting with, trying to get people to come back and visit their stores.
The retail landscape is a challenging one for sure, as stores try to reimagine themselves. People who are spending their times in stores expect a lot of them, and that's certainly true in the physical world. But what about the digital world? This brings us to our first tension. We'll talk about 5 today that are impacting the future of play. These tensions provide a good benchmark of where we are today, but they also give us a lens to think about tomorrow. Because what if they start to change? Later, we'll talk about 2 scenarios for the future. The first will be a bit of a baseline scenario where the future happens as a continuation of the present. The second will look at what could happen if even just one of these tensions shifts a little bit. Got it? Okay, here's tension 1. Most feel that being online will lead to more isolation, which in conventional terms it plausibly could. But it also depends on how you define isolation and how you define social. Many of the things we do and the ways we play virtually can be quite social, allowing us to play with people we know personally and meet new people virtually. And that could take the form of building relationships or quick in-game interactions. All this is starting very young, as the parents of Roblox players know quite well. Giefer says, there's a social aspect where even someone like an 8-year-old can feel like he's connecting with someone without being there together with them in person. The metaverse and immersive experiences are welcome platforms for playing games, as 3 in 5 gamers in a new Ipsos survey say that playing games in a metaverse will be better than playing them online today. What gamers and game viewers most frequently mentioned as expectations for gaming in the metaverse were fun gameplay, obviously, realistic imagery, and a multi-sensory experience, says Natalie Lacey, an executive vice president in our media and entertainment platforms practice. Brands should take note because in a world where gamers lead and will help drive these experiences, what works for them will work for others as well, especially as gamers themselves diversify, as Jill Giefer was discussing. Speaking of gamers, let's not talk just about how they influence the rest of the world these days, but how they influence each other. Janelle Cuddlecore Carter grew up with video games, but it wasn't until college that she got serious about play. Today, the 28-year-old is one of the world's best at iconic fighting game Tekken. Carter sees the esports fandom growing, from the crowds at tournaments to her nearly 25,000 Twitch followers. But she also thinks pros and fans alike need to hold each other accountable for making newcomers feel welcome. Esports fans can be fiercely loyal to their franchises, and they show their support in all sorts of ways, from wearing merch to attending tournaments. Today, nearly 2/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds say they'd rather watch someone else play video games than watch popular TV shows, per Ipsos research. But the similarities to traditional traditional sports, some things are new. In a live streaming age, the lines between work and play can get blurry for multi-hyphenate creators, just as the lines between spectator and play get blurry for audiences. And whenever anyone can hide behind a screen and comment on everything, it can be hard to hold people accountable. Carter loves her sport and the culture around it, but if the esports community wants to attract a new generation of players and fans, the current generation has to take responsibility to make that space a positive one, she says. But if you do that, you can grow a fan base that makes the business side possible. Again, similarities to traditional sports. Some of this will sound familiar, even though she's talking about a super complex fighting game. Here's what she called WTF's Christopher Good.
Having a following is a huge part of making it as a player. How you market yourself determines discoverability. It determines how financially supported are you. So you want your money to work for you. You want your brand to work for you. So if you're investing in merch and you have a huge brand, while you're grinding on the game or making content, you know that people are buying your merchandise. You don't have to worry about anything. And for the culture, I think it really helps because this merchandise, people wear this stuff all the time. They see you wearing the merch. They start wearing the merch. People ask, oh, where'd you get that? Especially if it's something catchy. Marketing wise, something catchy may be something that your game has that's really unique, or some meme. Like fighting game community has tons of that kind of stuff, sayings or phrases. You see them on shirts, even on shot glasses.
Adults aged 18 to 34 are almost 3 times as likely to say they're content creators as part of their fandom, 55 or part of their fandom than 55 plus Americans, which is yet another tension. Is about fan content creators or not so much. Even the 35 to 54-year-olds, however, are twice as likely as their older peers to create content. Janelle says, back in the day, kids talked about wanting to be a doctor or firefighter, something like that. Now they're going to start saying they want to be an esports player. It's already happening. And I will say that they also want to be streamers like her. But will battles over inclusivity and toxicity in many online communities thwart that ambition? Or will the financial challenges in many online platforms impede the future ability to monetize these audiences? Will the line between creator and player continue to erode and blur? We'll see as this tension plays out. The sports and gaming community, as well as its fandom, is increasingly diverse, as we've said. Sports content is a way to reach niche audiences, as well as one of the last mass market plays left. Ipsos research shows that using sports figures in context can lead to greater brand linkage. It's especially relevant that 41% of people say they're more likely to buy things from companies that support their favorite teams, says Pat Howard, an SVP in our creative excellence practice. Linking your brand with a favored team can be a strategy for the win. Traditional youth sports, like baseball and softball, have seen growing competition from technology, gaming, and newer sports in recent years. To address declining participation, Little League International is halfway through a 5-year growth plan, which included elevating Nina Johnson-Pitt to a new position as Senior Strategy Executive. She explains how the league is focused on access, experience, and retention to make Little League more fun and relevant for a new generation of players and fans. One of the biggest hurdles that youth sports face is they've become increasingly competitive at earlier ages, putting the emphasis on winning rather than fun and fundamentals, says Johnson-Pitt. That's causing many future players and therefore fans to drop out. That's also when the sport loses future players and fans. She says adults have made games more competitive too soon, partly due to well-intentioned aspirations for success or college scholarships. She says it's time for a reset to focus on what's best for the kids rather than the adults. As a coach, I'm raising an eyebrow. If fun is the key to retaining and growing the next generation of players and fans, what will change if winning isn't everything? Part of that, she said, is a challenge in much of the world of play. Even the playing field for girls and women, or evening the playing field for girls and women. Kate MacArthur spoke to her again with this kind of central question of what if the pipeline of young athletes dries up, either due to real and perceived danger of contact sports, or cost prohibitions, or a move to video games, or any of the questions that kicked off this issue. And about staying relevant and dealing with climate change and indirect impacts on equal opportunities. Here's what she told Kate.
we're always looking at staying relevant, because baseball is an old timer sport, you'll hear people say, but there are some ways that we think we can start to bridge that gap. So first, we do know there's oftentimes a connection between kids whose mom or dad played baseball or softball. We often ask the question when we have a captive audience and we're surveying parents, did you play Little League? So we can try to gather some of that data to understand what that connection is. So there's that piece that we need to be able to make parents understand the value of having their kids participate in Little League. You have more indoor facilities available in cold weather states. And so it's certainly jumping to that because they want to be able to compete with the warm weather states who can play more year round. But those facilities are not inexpensive. And as we continue to talk through the wealth gap and barriers to participation, not everyone can afford to play in a dome or play in an indoor facility. And it certainly changes the game. The benefit and the great thing about Little League is that we still have a sandlot opportunity. So you don't really need much. You can go out in a grassy lot or a field somewhere and the bat and a ball and be able to play. And so it would be really unfortunate if kids could no longer play that outside.
Climate is just one safety concern, and one that's maybe slightly more off in the future, though we're certainly seeing impacts already. But as the NFL recently reminded us all too clearly, sports are dangerous. That's having a chilling effect for parents in terms of what sports they do or don't put their kids into. And that brings us to our next tension. Another part of the pipeline equation for sports is what happens if parents pull their kids for the game. Anecdotally, that's already happening in sports like football and hockey in some communities. Stories of injuries and medical research continue to shed light on the dangers of head injuries, especially, which could push more young players out of some of today's most popular youth sports. At the same time, fewer kids are becoming multi-sports athletes, says Little League's Nina Johnson-Pitt. She says, we know that kids are picking one sport at a younger age, which may stifle some development and lead to more overuse injuries. She says that could accelerate a future which, as essayist Chuck Klosterman has posited, includes more virtual athletes and fewer human ones. Esports may only be just the beginning. Okay, we can't talk about youth sports without asking the one question on all of your minds. Should we all get trophies? Shockingly, we see some generational differences here. Boomers are like, nope. If you win, flat out, maybe. Otherwise, lick your wounds and go home, loser. Millennials and Gen Z, the boomers' kids take a slightly different and softer attitude. But okay, I digress. Participation in youth sports has been on the decline for much of the last decade. And with the cost of some sports soaring north of $2,000 a year and youth sports itself becoming a $19 billion industry, it's clear why many children are on the sidelines, says Johnny Sawyer, a research manager in Ipsos's Public Affairs Group. Improving access to necessary equipment and safe places to play is one solution. Another is reducing the cost, which will help alleviate a significant burden for many families and could provide more opportunity for kids from lower income homes to compete. Sawyer suggests adding, in a sports landscape that has become increasingly competitive and commercial, reducing stress and bringing the joy back for children could be the most important step in getting tomorrow's athletes and fans back into the game today. One thing we heard a lot about during the pandemic was the resurgence of board games and card games. Game Right's gesture logo adorns some of the most popular tabletop games, not just in my house, although certainly in my house, but in the last 30 years, including Sleeping Queens and Sushi Go. Game Right's Vice President of Product Development, Jason Schneider, says digital games lack the sensory experience like the feel of cards in your hands or the sounds of a ripple shuffle. But he also thinks the rise of video games has forced tabletop developers to make better, more engaging games. How long will this symbiotic yet frenemy state hold? Tabletop games are enjoying a renaissance partially because they're a cross-generation experience. Elders can easily learn a card or board game, but might face a steeper learning curve while learning online games like Among Us. As today's kids grow up, that could change. And that's one of the reasons Schneider is looking to port his games online too. But in the end, he thinks board games teach soft skills like patience, and he hopes that they survive so kids can keep learning, and even perhaps especially as they play. Here's what he told me when we spoke earlier this year.
I don't want to delude myself to say these are going to be around forever, because I think as our kids who are digital natives, as they become parents themselves, like what are the traditions that they're going to be handing down to their kids. I think all board game publishers should think that there's an existential threat out there. It's now about, this is what we all did. We all played Minecraft like crazy, especially during the pandemic. I don't know about your kids, but my kids just, it was an explosion of interest in Minecraft and Roblox. So if that's where they're going to go first, then will they turn to a board game or a card game or a party game when they know they can do it? I think at the end of the day, people are going to, like, when there's a large group gathering, being over the holidays, when there's more surprise, I think, in a card game or board game experience, because the fact that there's a sort of novelty to it still. It's, oh wow, we're doing something that's like this throwback to when my grandparents used to play games, when they're before screens. So there will always be that. It's just, is it a growth segment? How much do our kids and then the next generation after that, how much will they continue to explore this area in the same way that we are?
Joe Giefer talked about how a thing many perceive as dying, like shopping malls, could continue to survive. And Jason Schneider thinks that his industry needs to be innovating for its own future too. One thing is certain, play can bring us together, both in person and virtually. But how much of each? That brings us to tension 4. Everything competes for our time in the play economy, and that creates some unnecessary tensions. In-person and virtual play can coexist certainly, but what if we have to pick one way to spend our time? In-person wins by a wide margin. But will that hold? GameRight Schneider thinks that there's a time and a place for each. He says, when there's a large group gathering over the holidays, there's more surprise in a card game. But he's also realistic. While there is this tension, tomorrow's generations are already spending more and more time playing in online spaces. So will that be a life stage or a generational shift? From stadium tours to the Olympics, some of the most beloved occasions for play are mass gatherings. Connected technology is changing what fans expect from these experiences. And Ipsos research confirms that both physical and digital interaction points before, during, and after the main event are critical moments that bring the experience to life and make it memorable, says Stephanie Banos-Ryback, Executive Vice President of our Customer Experience Practice. Whether participating in person, at home, or on the go, fans have more ways than ever to interact with the players, performers, other fans, and the event producers. Technology provides the integrated experience, leading to innovation in how we play. Ducking back to climate change for a moment, the world is on path to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And even if we continue to overshoot our climate goals, we could find ourselves playing in a very different world. From air-conditioned stadiums to digital platforms, how will we compete and watch if we can't go outside? Climate change threatens to transform nearly every aspect of our lives, including how and where we play. Will professional athletes be able to compete in less habitable climates? Will your kids play in the metaverse rather than scorching outdoors? And what will that do for the pipeline of new athletes and fans? A remarkable 83% of people agree that we are heading for an environmental disaster unless we change our habits quickly, says Chris Murphy, the global head of Ipsos Market Strategy and Understanding Practice. In a worst-case future, we will need to modify our sports seasons, our rules, or even our athletes. When it comes to competition, winning is, by definition, the point. And the shift from friendly games to playing to win has motivated innovations in training, equipment, and even genetic inventions. George Church is a pioneer in synthetic biology and genomics, the study of humans' complete set of DNA. He helped start the Human Genome Project and played a key role in launching CRISPR, the gene editing technology. He's also launched some 50 biotech startups, including one aimed at boosting athletic performance. The kinds of enhancements that people use to improve their competitive advantage is ever shifting and began as far back as when people figured out that wearing sandals helped them win ancient marathons, says Church. Thus began centuries of innovation, from physics to nutrition to genetics, to even out competition among those who were blessed with genetic advantages. He sees no difference between doing so by training, nutrition, or gene therapy, as long as they're regulated for safety and everyone has access to them. But will that take the fun out of competition? Here's what he told Kate MacArthur.
The future keeps changing. The rules of sports were not carved in stone shortly after the marathon. The original marathon was run barefoot. It wasn't long before people were wearing sandals. which at first seemed like there was not an advantage, but then it became clear it was an advantage. We developed better javelins and discus. It basically was a showplace for your technology. It's both training and what you're wearing. Same thing goes for nutrition. For a while, you could call it cheating. You train at high altitude. That gives you higher red blood cell counts. And is that cheating? What is cheating and what is in the rules keeps changing. And it's completely up to us. I think that there is almost no difference between training at high altitude, taking erythropoietin as a protein, and taking erythropoietin as a gene. Right? Because the gene makes the protein, going to high altitude makes the protein, they all end up, you make more red blood cells. But as long as you're regulating it the same way that the FDA regulates drugs in general, and physician ethics has guidelines, it's more to regulate it for safety rather than to regulate it for some arbitrary rule. I think that's where we've been headed since the sandals were adopted for the marathon.
So yeah, technology has always been a part of sport, but so is the controversy that comes with change. And that's our final tension. This tension is surprisingly close about enhanced versus pure performance. And one could make the argument that Barry Bonds was just using science to make his swings harder, which fans mostly enjoyed watching in the moment. But then it felt like it was cheating enough that he's been denied entry into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. But if 40% of Americans are already open to new ways to enhance athletic performance without bickering about fairness, perhaps whole new ways of competing are plausible. Church says, I think as long as these methods are safe, effective, and accessible to people somewhat independent of money, that's probably going to meet a lot of our ethical standards. Okay, ready to think a little more about the future? It's plausible scenario time. This is the first of two places we could wind up based on all of our attentions where they are today. So imagine it's 2035. Much of California and the Pacific Northwest have burned. You want a swimming pool in Arizona? You'll need a license, but good luck. They're prohibitively expensive. Climate change is happening all around us. Playing sports outside in this climate is increasingly difficult. Outdoor stadia are becoming relics. Rainouts make spring scheduling impossible. The lack of rain during the rest of the year likewise impacts the idea of having a grass field. But we adapt. In this world, more activities move indoors and online for starters. For games that still happen outside, we have new cooling jerseys and other equipment for athletes and fans. SPF 50 sunscreen won't cut it anymore. Most people currently think that enhancing an athlete's performance through science and tech makes the games less real, but in this future it's inevitable. Yet people push back and fandom falls off. Parents ration outdoor time the way they try to ration screen time today because they don't want their kids to melt. Kids play more indoors and virtually. Parents try to encourage offline, but it's a challenge. And for most kids, this means that playing outdoor sports like baseball and soccer is out of reach. But a new set of genetic and synthetic tools allow for more children to be adapted to climate change impacts. The first kids start playing t-ball in youth leagues around 2035, and those kids are essentially scouted before birth, and fantasy players are collecting stats on their performance from this age. In this world, virtual gaming and the metaverse flourish, providing limitless options for entertainment and play. So do, perhaps antithetical, board games and card games. People play, watch each other and their favorite streamers, and socialize in virtual spaces. Now imagine people become more comfortable with enhancing humans through science and technology. We're not too far from a future where athletes can be made more climate resistant. So what will play look like then? What will these enhanced humans lead to new levels of competition that we find extra compelling? Will it be just a matter of being able to keep the level of play similar to what it is now as the world around us changes? How will that impact our fandom, the way we spend our time and our money on play? Will there be consumer level versions of the pickup basketball players and after work softball leagues? So if this tension shifts, imagine that again, it's 2035 and we've been accustomed to seeing genetically modified athletes or donning new gear to keep cool and safe while playing outdoors. And it means we can keep enjoying all the things we enjoy today. They're just different. Many of the trends are the same. We're still living in a world with more play happening indoors, but the need to knock down Chicago's historic Wrigley Field and move soccer pitches under domes is slightly less urgent. People were already spending more of their playtime on video games and esports, but those growth curves continue, but don't necessarily accelerate. Tabletop games start to lose some of their pandemic-era nostalgia-driven luster in the marketplace. And in this world, hybrid work and hybrid play start to coincide as our time indoor and in office merge. Many work tasks have become gamified as Gen Z's influence grows in the workplace, having had play embedded in their education since birth with tools like GimKit and Quizlet. Employers have adopted and created ways for them to accomplish their tasks but still feel like they're playing. Exasperated parents still tell their kids to take it outside. Soccer and softball camps limit their outdoor time but haven't phased it out entirely. But there are equity issues because taking historically outdoor games indoors is not cheap. Access to training is rationed to those who can most afford it, and many of the things we consider play today will take on a more functional role for the folks who can participate. The rest of us watch and interact via streaming and content creation, which becomes the new definition of active participation. As I've said, What the Future is a monthly publication from Ipsos WTF. Each month we cover the future of a different topic. These are some of the topics on screen that we covered in 2022, from aging to identity to food, music, spending, work. We cover a lot of things, and we talk about how those things impact your businesses. If you get a chance, you can just aim your little cell phone at this, subscribe to the newsletter. We drop an issue once a month, so you get one email from us each month with links to the issue and all of the content that is in there. And we do this because the more you get yourself into the future, whether that's true through a formal foresight engagement or even just being able to have a workshop and give your team a little bit of time to think about longer term than the next quarter and the end of their next financial period. But the more you think about tomorrow, the better questions, the better research you're going to do today in terms of the kinds of things you need to innovate, the future jobs that will be done, all of the different ways that we interact with our world and our creative and our customer experience and our user experience. Thinking about the future helps you prepare for those futures, whatever those futures might hold. So when you imagine possible tomorrows, you're going to ask better questions today. Again, I'm Matt Carmichael, the editor of What the Future. I appreciate your time and coming out to join us for the webinar today. All the webinars and all the issues are archived at future.ipsos.com. And we'll see you next month for the future of love, which will be dropping a little before Valentine's. And our webinar will be on Valentine's Day itself, because it's like we plan these things. So again, join us for the future of love. Sign up for the newsletter if you can. See the stuff on YouTube, and we'll see you all next month. Thanks, everybody.